Okay, guys, so let's get started. So the topic of the day is Backendless UI components. We will talk about it for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. After that, if there are any questions, please send them to the chat pod of Zoom. We'll be answering as many questions as we can get. Backendless UI components is a feature of UI Builder that allows to embed a component that you write by hand with code, or a component that has already been implemented and you want to embed it into UI Builder. There is a little wrapper that you would need to create around the actual component. Custom UI component development is actually based on code. So, but once it is implemented and embedded into UI Builder, it becomes a codeless UI component. So you do not need to know code to use the component. However, to build a UI component, you'll be following some coding knowledge is going to be required, and we will talk about it today. In order to talk about UI components, I thought that rather than me describing this, I'm going to go straight to the source, and I invited my colleague Vladimir Upirov, who is an engineer on the team. He's the principal architect of UI Builder, and there is not a single person in the world who would know and understand UI Builder better than Vladimir. So he will talk about how to build UI Builder components, and today will be probably one of the best opportunities to ask any UI Builder related question, or really anything related to Backendless is always welcome, but for UI Builder there is really no other person who could answer perhaps the most complex questions that you can come up with. So for this, I'm going to pass the baton to Vladimir. He will continue with this presentation, but I'll stick around, and let's learn how to build UI Builder components.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Mark. So custom UI components. This is very important thing in UI Builder. Most of you, when building your apps, face at all with some issues with building some components which are more complex than built-in components. So. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. This is my the first meeting, and yeah, I need to relax. Okay. So custom UI components. We built this feature a couple of weeks ago, or a month, I don't remember. And at this moment, we still improving this feature. But today, I'm gonna show you a simple demo to demonstrate the basic features of these custom UI components. So UI components, what is it for? Actually, when you build your app, you use built-in components, and sometimes you need to have, for instance, simple input. Because in our UI Builder, we use Material UI library to render input, and this is not easy to decorate or something else. And with custom components, you are able to build a simple input or any HTML component and customize it as you want. Another thing which is very important is enabling external libraries and components. It means you can get any library or module from NPM and integrate it into UI Builder. For instance, it could be a map or chart or something else. And very very important thing is you can get a very complex component and inject it into your UI builder. Okay. Another very important part is with custom UI components, you are able to have an access to browser and mobile API. For instance, you want to get, I don't know, maybe page title or geolocation or something else. Of course, you can do this with codeless, with custom code block, but in UI components, you can build your component with this API. I don't know if you understand what that means. I guess so. Okay. Backendless UI components is actually a React component. So it supports completely supports JS6 syntax. It supports all React API. It means you can use any hooks, context, hooks, and whatever you use with React. It is possible to use with custom components. It also has full integration with UI Builder. What does it mean? It means you can have access to page data, app data, maybe another components or something else. It means this component is have access to any UI component, any UI component on the page, or also it is sensitive to changing parent data model. It means when any parent data model is changed, the custom component will be rendered. It means, I don't know if you're familiar with data model rules, how it works with built-in components. So with custom components, it works the same way.
If I could inject here, so JSX, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with JSX. It is what this is when you build a component in React. Of course, HTML is what's produced to render that component visually. And there are two different ways to render HTML. One is by using browser API and saying, hey, it's going to be such and such element, such as input, for instance. And it will have these attributes, whether it's type or read-only, whatever. Everything has API, and everything is presented through HTML. So producing that HTML can be done either with API, which becomes kind of very verbose, because every single little thing that needs to be rendered, you have to do it programmatically. And the other way is to actually provide that HTML that needs to be rendered. And providing that HTML in the code is what JSX syntax is about, which makes it so much simpler to actually define what the visuals need to be rendered like. Okay, so that's the JSX thing. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that one of the design goals that we had when we started working on UI Builder custom components is that once a component is implemented and embedded into UI Builder, everything that you already know about UI components, such as clicking logic and having events or properties and data binding or defining styling properties, everything needs to be applicable to custom components. So when you build a component, a custom component, you actually have a way to define all the properties and events and data binding and everything that once you bring that component into UI Builder, all of those things become available to developers who write applications without coding. So that's the thing. And integration with data model that Vladimir was talking about is definitely one of those things, because within UI Builder, everything is, well, the majority of things are driven through data binding by integrating and interacting with data models. So that is also a very important element of custom UI components, is how they can interact with data models and interact with other components that are written by other developers or written by Backendless core team that included standard components into UI Builder. So all of that becomes a very tightly integrated ecosystem of components working together. So I'm sorry for injecting this, but Vladimir, please go ahead.
Okay, next. On this slide, I'm going to show you where each UI component actually is placed. As you know, UI Builder has many UI containers or versions of your application or whatever you want. Each UI container can have as many UI components as you want. It means, for instance, you have two UI containers. Your main application and your admin application, for instance. And each of these UI containers will have its own number of UI components. I assume it's pretty clear, right? Okay, each UI component can be used on a page or on several pages, or it may not be used at this moment, and I don't know. I guess it's pretty clear, and if you have any questions, please comment, and I tell you a little bit more about this structure. Okay. Can I change size for this? Each UI component, each custom UI component divides into three different elements, I would say. The first one is property. Properties is a two-way connection between the custom component and other UI components on the page. For instance, let's consider an input component and which properties the input can have. For instance, it could be value or placeholder or type or name or whatever. And we can get access for each property from other components by using codeless. And we can change this property from other components, change property of this component. Okay. I don't know if I tell you clear, because for me it's pretty easy, because I develop it and I know how it works, and for me as a technical person it's pretty hard to describe some things for other persons. Okay.
That's okay, you're doing good. Please go ahead.
I hope so. Okay, events. Events, this is a one-way connection between this component and other. What does it mean? For instance, our input may have on change event. It means when value in the component is changed, the input component, fires an event, and another component can subscribe to the event and do some logic, and or change this input, or change data in the page data or app data or whatever. And action, the last one, is also one-way connection between other component and this one. But in this way, it means other component can affect to this component. For instance, for input, it could be clear value action, or set disable, or set read only, or something else. Do you understand? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's create a new component, and we can dive deeply into each part, and I think it will be more productive to see how it works than just listening. So in that demo, I'm going to create a simple input, because input, I try to select another component, but the input, in my opinion, the best one, because we can demonstrate properties, data binding, events, action, and so on. So we will build HTML input. Then we decorate it, because UI custom components is completely integrated with theme and app extensions, and we can use app extensions to decorate our custom components, and our custom components might have its own styles. Generally, each custom component, I guess, will have own styles. Then we are going to add basic properties, some events, and some actions to demonstrate the entire flow. Okay. I have a clear UI container, and in this UI container we are going to create our custom components. First of all, to create a new component, you have to open components section. At this moment, there is no component. There are no components, and once we create one, let's call it I don't know, simple input. We also can provide a description to describe the custom UI components with more explanation, but I guess in our case, simple input will be enough. Okay. Once the component is created, it immediately opens the editor for UI components. We can see this section is divided into 3 parts. On the left hand, we can see a file browser. This is files of the UI component. So as you can see, there are already created a couple of files. This one is component JSON. Then we have a folder for styles, and also we have a folder for actually our components, where we will write code. So these folders can be renamed or removed, or I don't know, rename it, remove it. Yeah. So we can create any other files. I don't know, listed.js, for instance. In this demo, we do not need any external files, but we can create and use them. Okay, component JSON is actually describing these custom components. So when we add properties, events, actions, or something else, it's actually change the component JSON file. So I do not recommend you to change this manually, because of course, if you know what you do, go ahead, change. But actually should understand what actually you change, because you can break your custom components. So I would do not recommend you to change this file. Okay, on the middle we can see a section for editing files if the text tab is selected. But also there are three another sections. The first one is properties. This is for configuration, for configuring properties. The next one for configuring events, and the last one is for configuring actions of the component. We will dig into each of them, but I don't know. Okay, and on the right hand you can see preview of the custom component. At this moment, this is actually empty because we have an empty UI components, and we have only system properties, ID, classes, and display for changing visibility, or this property is persisted in each built-in component. So there's three properties.
Now, these properties that are on the right side, they are the properties that, and as you configure additional ones, and you will see how that works, but these are the actual styling as to how it shows up here is exactly the same as what you will see when you drag your component in onto the page, and on the right side in the style editor, these properties will show up. So here we try to give a preview of exactly what the end user will experience when they start using your component that you're configuring and developing here.
When we create FAQ properties, events, and actions, I will show how it looks like
Cool.
with some properties. Okay, first of all, let's take a look on the IndexJS file. This is the main or the entry point of the UI component. So this file should have should export default component, and you can have another files and import it in the file, but this IndexJS should export exactly default component, default property, I would say. This name, my custom component, it could be changed. If you would like, you can change it, for instance, simple component. It doesn't matter because this is more important for debug. When you open your page and open DevTool, React DevTool, you can see a tree of components, and you can easily find this one. Okay, at this moment, when we create a custom component, the function of component looks without any props. But in the next release, we are going to add basic properties to show you which props you can use, and give you a simple way to communicate with another part of your build. So one of these property is component. Component property is very important because this is an object which represents the custom component instance. Okay, let's go to the custom component instance a little bit later, because when we have a specific task with it. Okay, let's return a simple UI element. So we just input here input element like HTML syntaxes, but this is actually JSX syntaxes. So you can input here any HTML, and with a little changing, it can render this HTML. When I say little changes, it means in HTML you specify class as class, and here, for instance, simple input. But in JSX, you have to write class name. You see? So, there are a couple of difference between JSX and HTML, but mostly you can use any HTML as a JSX. Okay, let's save the component and place it on our page and see how it looks like. Okay. When we come back to user interface section, we can see our landing page. This is the default page. And on the right hand, we can see a new category in blocks. It calls custom components. So each time when you create a new component or install it from marketplace, you can see this component in the list. So you can just drag and drop it, and the component is placed on the page. At this moment, each custom component do not have a specific preview. It means you can have a simple input component, chart, maps, I don't know, button, and when you place it on your page, they all will look like the same, you see? So no difference. But in the next release, we are already fixed this, and we are going to give you an ability to modify this preview. So it means you can open this simple input component by double click or extra button. You can open designer for this custom component, and you can decorate it as you want. For instance, if this is a button, you can place a button in the preview, and on the page, this custom component will render this button. You see? Actually, you can see it because this is not released yet. Okay. So, but today it looks like just a white block with just a little difference in the text inside. Okay, we placed the input element, the custom component on the page, and let's take a look how it looks like in the preview mode. Okay, we can see a simple input. Okay, but it doesn't look good, and let's decorate it with using styles. And I have prepared styles for this. So just play this less or CSS as you want, and okay. And this is pretty simple CSS. We just decorate background, color, font, box shadow, and so on. So let's check how it looks like now. Oh, I guess I have wrong class name. Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, we have a CSS selector, my simple input here. And in the component, we have to add this class name to actually decorate this. So let's save the component and check.
Now, as a side effect, notice that he modified the styling and the component code in the component section. The page did not need to change. The page already references that component. Simply by modifying it on the component side, the page instantly picks up all the changes that were made on the component side.
Yeah. Okay. As you can see, our input looks much better. Yeah. And we actually can find lots of decoration for simple elements like the button, like input, like checkbox, and so on. So if you need a simple element, you just input a couple of line of codes, then Google some styles. For instance, this one I Googled. So and you can have a pretty nice element. Okay, let me show you how to decorate the element with theme. For instance, at this moment we do not enable any theme. So let's select this one. So when you select a theme, each built-in components will apply these styles and will look in the same way. So, but our custom components need to be decorated manually. So each UI theme has a theme primary color. You can find a lot more variables which you can use in your custom component, but let's just use only this one. So we just copy this color, go back to our component, and change border color for the custom component. And let's check how it looks. Okay, blue and blue, no difference here. Let's check another theme. Okay, it should show us more difference. Okay, here we go. As you can see, our input, we do not change any styles in the custom component, but changing the theme, we can apply these styles to the custom components. You see? Let's select some white theme. Okay. I assume everybody understands what I'm talking about theme and how to decorate, and it should be pretty clear for you, right? If not, please comment, leave your questions, and I will be glad to answer to each of them. Okay, move on. Let's talk about properties. This is I would say, the most important part of each custom component, because if some custom components may not have events or may not have actions, but properties, I don't think so. Each component will have at least one property it will have. The first, when we need to add a new property, we just click the button Add New, and it opens a panel to configure the property for the custom components. Actually, this panel was a little redesigned, and in the next release, it will look a little different. And we improved a couple of things, and but I will demonstrate you properties on this version, exactly. Okay, the first input we should type it is reference in code. What does it mean? Let's consider our input and imagine what properties it could have. For instance, placeholder. When our input when input is empty, we would like to show some text to show our customers what they should do. For instance, we have a login page and we have two inputs, and we would like to show in the first one username, and in the second one we would like to show password. Okay, so placeholder is very important property for input element. So let's create a property placeholder. Okay, when we type placeholder here, it actually display in preview how or which settings the custom component will have. And when we select an instance of the component on the page, we can change the value. Okay, let's give it a label. And this is what I talked about redesigning this panel. Actually, a value type has been moved up next to the reference in code input. So in a couple of weeks, you will see that value type is placed next to reference in code, because settings label is optional, and for instance, we do not like to show it in settings, but we would like to use in logic. Okay, anyway, we select text, and we can give it a default value. For instance, type value. Okay. So as you can see on the preview, we can see a new property placeholder, and there is and there is already typed value which we can change, but this is just a preview, so it doesn't affect anything. Okay, let's save the property and check how it what changed on the page. Okay, when we select our component, we can see this new property type value. So we can modify or leave it as it is. But let's check how it looks like on the preview. There we go, nothing changed. As you can see, adding a new property doesn't change our custom component because this is just a declaration for property. So it means another parts of UI builder ecosystem will know that this component can have property placeholder. But in the preview mode or runtime, we do not see any changes because we actually didn't use this value in our component. So let's change our IndexJS file and add this property. So placeholder, and we can use this property right from the component component object. Okay, so this value can be used here, or you can create a variable or whatever you want. Let me to see each every code. Okay, let's save the component and check how it looks like. Here we go. Type value. You see? But we can change this property on the page. For instance, we can have two different instances, and for first one we type username, and for the next one we type password. Okay, let's check. There we go. Password and username. Okay, this was the simplest way to use a property. However, basically you will need to use property in your logic or bind it with data model. So for that, we can type logic handle ID, placeholder, logic. This input in the next release also will be removed, and we will have only one toggle to enable logic handler. But today we have to type some string to identify the handler. Also, we can provide a label for that, placeholder, logic, and enable data binding. And now, if we select preview handlers, we can see this new event handler for that property, for this property. You see? So it doesn't work if you try to add any logic. It just to represent you how the event handler will look like in your design. So let's save it and go to logic. Or let's go from this. For instance, we select username, and we would like to provide another label in logic. Of course, you can have much complex logic here, but this is just a demo, so I just type some username, I don't know, from Codeless. This is just to demonstrate you that how the property is referencing to Codeless. Okay, let's update our page. Here we go. Okay, I think this placeholder property is pretty clear, and let's create a property value to to cover more complex options. Okay, I would delete this one and delete this second component. Okay, let's create a new property value. Okay. Provide a value in code, reference in code value, settings label, it would be default value, type text, handle logic, value logic, value logic, and enable data binding. We also can provide a handle description, and when the description is not empty, it will look okay. Handlers, when you move your cursor over the label, you can see this description. Mostly it's it's not needed because value logic, at least for me, is pretty clear, and it doesn't require any additional explanation. But if you would like, you can add this. Okay, we add a new property value. Then we are going to add the property in our input. Okay, value. And the same way as we use with placeholder, we use component value. Okay. But with value, we have to provide an on change handler, because React, if we pass here, for instance, hello, without change handler, it won't refresh when we type something. Let me demonstrate you. Okay, we can see hello value, but when we try to type something, it doesn't update, because the React will not change actually the value, because we pass the value, and React always render things. So we need to provide an on change event, event handler. Let's call it on change. Create a function. Event. And when we type, each time when we type any new char, the React will call this handler, and we can update the value in our component. So here we use component value, and here we update the value. Event target. Okay, so let's see how it works now. Okay, yeah, it works. Let me show you how work it with the data binding. So, for instance, we have our custom component input, and also we have built-in input. and we would like to bind the value property on the same property in the page data model. So for built-in input, we type value logic, I don't know, username, okay, and the same value we can type for the value logic for our custom component. And at this moment, our custom component and built-in input will be binded on the same property in data model, and when the property is changed, each of these components will be refreshed. So let's check how it works. Okay, type some value here, or type some value here. You can see? Okay. I think it's enough to talk about properties, Mark.
Yeah, we're getting close to our 1 hour limit, and
Yeah.
I think you also wanted to talk about actions, right, or events as well.
Okay, I briefly demonstrate how events and actions work.
Okay.
Okay, for instance, our input can fire on change an event, and we would like to, in some element of our another components on the page, to change. Okay, let's create on change event, and I will show you what I mean. On change event, we can also provide a label on change, and we should use this handler ID also in code, because if we do not add any code, it won't work. Okay. To use event handlers, we have a property event handlers in the component. So event handlers on change. Oh, when the value is changed, we would like to run the event. So value, and run event handler with value. I assume it should be an object. Okay. Yeah, in the preview, on the preview site, we can see on change event handler. So if we go back to our logic, we can add a handler, and for instance, let's print on change on input value changed. Okay, let's check how it works. Open dev tool, and yeah, as you can see, this event handler is running when we type on each type, but we do not see a new value. Yeah, so to be able to get some properties in event handlers, we have to register context blocks. So what does it mean? When we register a new handler, there is a button add context block, and when we click, we can add some context blocks. And when we save and go back to logic, we can see a new block value. So now we can print this new value. Okay, value. change it to, okay, let's check. You see? So, this is how handlers works. I guess it's also pretty clear. So when we need to fire some action, some event, and add logic, for instance, of the UI component, we should register and a new event handler. Okay, and the last one is actions. For instance, let's create an action to, I don't know, to get current value and clear current value. So provide actions, provide ID for the actions, and this ID we will use in our code. Get value and clear value. Okay. If we open, okay, get value, when we add, we can provide a label. So get value, this is optional, but you can change it. And if you need to have a block which has a return, you should toggle this checkbox. So you see the difference. This, the first block, can be connected to another blocks, connected as a return value. But the second one doesn't return any value, and it can be connected only in vertical sequence.
Procedurally.
Yeah. So save these actions. And as we know, each element we add, property or event handler or action, we have to describe in code. So open our IndexJS file and register these actions for the component. Component value. So as you can see, we use properties and actions in the same component object. So you cannot have a property value and an action with name value. So you should have different names, because in the next release we add validation, and you will not be able to save a component where names of actions is persisted in properties list. Okay, we register get value and clear value. Clear value. So as you more specific. Get value, return component value. And clear value doesn't return anything, but it reset the current value. Okay? I guess it's also pretty simple.
Yeah.
And when we save the component, let's add two buttons to run these actions. Okay. Okay. Let's remove this one. Okay. And get value and clear value. Okay. When we open logic, open click on click event, we do not see these actions for the custom component, because this custom component doesn't have an ID. I believe we will change it in the future, and we will generate the ID automatically, because generally you always you always will communicate with the custom components, and you always need to provide an ID for the component. So user name input. So now, when we open logic, we can see a new category in codeless blocks, and there are two blocks, so get value and clear value. The same blocks we saw on the preview. Okay, so when you specify your blocks, you actually can see how it will look like. Okay, let's come back to our logic and get current value. Show message and get value of username input. And for on-click event, let's just clear the value. That's it. Okay, if we type something and type or click on the button, we can see hello value. So it means you can get some state or some value from the component from any another component. So hello, and let's check how works clear button. Boom. And it's clear. Okay. Of course, under the actions can be much complex logic. For instance, if you build I don't know, maybe a component for map, there can be actions at map marker or at circle or something else, and inside the action you will need to write more code than just one line. Okay, I guess that's it.
Thank you, Vladimir. Fantastic demo, definitely communicates some of the core functionality that we wanted to bring out with UI components. We are going to be working, well, we haven't really started, but it is pretty high on our priority list is to get the documentation and additional examples for how to build it, because we envision that will be becoming one of the core functions for enriching the Backendless ecosystem for everyone who's building applications with Backendless. So there is also a blog post on our website that walks through pretty much every single step for building a custom UI component. Vladimir, who did a presentation today, he wrote that one. So if you are interested in the process, learning about the process of building custom UI components, please visit the Backendless blog post. I know we are out of time. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. We'll try to answer them quickly. Vladimir, while you were presenting, there was a discussion in the chat, and I wanted to ask you this question. So when someone is building a custom component, and they can reference some existing libraries, for the components that we have already published that are built-in components in Backendless, is it possible to reference them somehow in the custom components? And I'm not talking about some basic or even basic ones, but maybe some more complex ones. Is it even possible or not?
If I currently understand the question, it means we are going to get a reference to some element on the page from custom component, right?
Right. Like for instance, if we were to take, let's say, spinner or chip or whatever, or icon, can we reference that component in custom component in order to modify its behavior? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. I just wanted to know whether it's even technically possible.
I think it's not possible yet, but we are going to add this ability. Yeah.
I see. Because my thinking was that today, if the question is to modify existing behavior or to create some new behavior based on the components that we already provide, reusable components is the answer for that, because that's how you can create visuals, and then with code or without code you can add additional behavior. So that's kind of my thinking. And then for custom components, it's basically for everything else, you know, building from scratch or building on top of NPM. Right, so Nicholas, so to build on top of, the process will be you create your rendering, you know, throw components on the page, lay out them as you see, and then at the top level, whenever you have a block or container, once you have laid out and you added logic, go in there and you select and you say make reusable. And that becomes a component on its own that actually will be listed in the components tab in UI Builder. And that's the component where you can add your own logic and the functionality and rendering and really modify it to your liking. And that's how you build on top of, especially with a no-code approach. Because with custom components, it is 100% code. It's just, that's going to be JSX, JavaScript, some of the React knowledge would definitely be coming helpful. But to build on top of, it is going to be reusable components. And reusable components can also be published to marketplace. So the path to get your component in front of other developers who use Backendless, it will be both through reusable and through custom UI components. So hopefully that clarifies this. Okay, guys, if you have any other questions, please let us know. If not, thank you for attending our meeting today. I hope you found it useful. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible. Once we start publishing some of the initial reusable custom components, we're actually been developing some. So a first wave of custom components is coming to the marketplace, and you will see that there's going to be a signature pad component where you can gather a signature. Vladimir, what else do we have in there?
Actually, I can share a GitHub repository.
Yeah, just put it in the chat, because everyone can see what that code looks like.
If you want to see how we build custom components, or maybe I don't know, join code review.
Sure.
So it's welcome.
Yeah, but what are the examples of some of the components we're building now? I remember signature pad.
Yeah, signature pad, simple model, alert, autocomplete, stepper, snack bar, transfer list, rating batch, gallery.
Awesome.
A lot of components.
Yeah, and this is just the first wave out of many. And
these components actually are in process, but we have some components which is on the QA stage.
QA.
So
okay.
This is audio player, backdrop, draggable list, lift map, signature pod, webcam photo, and so on.
Awesome.
So a lot of components.
That's great. Yeah, because guys, there are really very few technical boundaries for what can be brought into UI Builder, and we are going to be making it. Definitely, our goal is to make it as easy as possible. Some things may not be just simple, just because the way some components are written, you kind of have to understand how they're built. But in the chat, there is a link to our custom component library that contains all the components that we're actually working on. All of them are open source. You can see how they're done and kind of follow what we've done there. Backendless UI Builder, where it is today, is It is already quite powerful, but we are really just on the verge of making it a system where you can build practically anything, absolutely anything, and leverage what's already being done as far as components in the NPM sphere, I guess. Anyway, thank you for joining our call today. We'll get the presentation out as soon as possible, and we will see you in about 3 weeks or so, because we'll be skipping the next two. Thank you. Bye.